The Truth Girls.
Hi everyone, it's Sonia here. Welcome to the basement party. Yes, it's going to be basement party today because I have so much going on in my life in the day. Wow, I just want to give you guys some updates, on my personal life, and also a little bit about what I think about what's going on in the world right now. Before I start, I just like to remind you, please like me on Facebook. Thank you for supporting my channel on Patreon. Thank you for subscribing to my backup channel, Truth or Girls TV. Please remember to subscribe here and hit the bell to receive all notifications. Also, I'd like to just remind you, since it is summer and summer does encourage odors, because a lot of odors are caused by bacteria, I still have these pouches available which release ClO2 gas, which eliminate viruses, bacteria, fungus, and mold, and by doing that they eliminate odors too. So whether you have odors in your car, pet odors in your home, laundry that didn't get done, whatever it is, these things will get rid of the smell, and they're still 15% off, no shipping and handling, even if you live in Canada. And I also have ClO2 tabs available. So if you're interested, please click the link below for more info. Okay, you guys, so I want to give you a few updates. I want to let you know also that I do think of you. I hope you're all doing well. You guys are in my prayers. So on a personal note, now it's the end of the school year and I'm expected to do these huge reports on my son's school progress, even though we're homeschooling, and even though I use like the unschooling approach, I still have to do all this stuff, and you wouldn't believe like the stacks and stacks of like reports and evaluations that I'm expected to do. On top of that, I have to like fill out this template, write down like the progress in every single subject, submit all these works and reports. I mean, and it's like I have to do this whole thing at the end of the year after he's done all the progress. You know, it's not like you can just keep doing it through the year. Anyhow, it's a huge thing. Yeah, so we'll see how that turns out. The other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit was my friends are concerned about the protests. So one of my friends was telling me about what's going on in Seattle, where the protesters had taken over a section of downtown. They're calling it the CHAZ, which stands for Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. So they took over this area, the police left, and now the protesters are like holding this part of the city. So with an open mind, I went to investigate. I'm going to give you my opinion as Auntie Sonia here. Get ready. What is going on inside the protest zone? Some people are going to tell you they're armed in there, and like it's militants, it's militias, it's Antifa, it's terrorists. There have been a few people apparently who had open carried, which apparently was not illegal. But I am understanding they're kind of hanging out. The kids are drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. They had a movie screening. So what are these people doing up there in the CHAZ? The police chief says rapes, robberies, and all sorts of violent acts have been occurring in the area and we're not able to get to them.
Our 911 response times have tripled in the area. They've gone from just over 5 minutes to about 18 minutes. Rapes, robberies, and all sorts of violent acts that have been occurring in the area that we're not able to get to.
So what she actually said was that it takes 3 times longer to arrive at the scene of a crime, and that crime is occurring. She didn't actually say there are more incidents of these crimes than there usually are. I'd like to see if anyone has evidence that crime has gone up in those 6 blocks. That would be interesting. I'll tell you one thing that has gone up: communism.
I want you to find by the time you leave this autonomous zone, I want you to give $10 to one African American person from this autonomous zone. And if you find that's difficult, if you find it's hard for you to give $10 to people of color, to black people especially, you have to think really critically about, in the future, are you going to actually give up power and land and capital when you have it? If you have a hard time giving up $10, you got to think about, are you really down with this struggle? Are you really down with the movement? Because if that is a challenge for you, then I'm unsure if you're in the right place. So find an African American person. The white people, I see you. I see every single one of you. And I remember your faces. You find that African American person and you give them $10. Cash App, Venmo, $10 in your pocket. That's my challenge to you. Do it.
Yeah, I understand that this is a symbolic gesture, but it is also so pointless. It just works on the assumption that the kind of privilege that we're talking about here is the kind where for one person to gain privilege, another one has to lose it, where actually, when it comes to police brutality, the privilege would be that nobody would be subject to it. It also seems to be working on the assumption that all white people are inherently more privileged than all black people. There's a lot of underprivileged white people out there too, you know. Actually, this symbolic gesture, it's, I think, even kind of insulting to people of color, because it's kind of like a symbolic welfare system. Here, take $10. Well, you know, this really looks like bullshit to me. I tell you, man, you know what the vibe I'm getting is? I don't think that this is like an armed uprising. I think this is a lot more like Occupy. Apparently they do not have central leadership and there's like no concrete plan. They just kind of took over this area and they're just sort of hanging out. In my experience, when people do that, it doesn't last very long. They do eventually get tired of occupying whatever they're occupying. And moreover, what happens when you have people from a group like that sort of settling into an area is that other people will come in who are not even protesters. Homeless people especially. This is exactly what happened with Occupy. It happened in Montreal, it happened in BC, it happened everywhere. What happened was these little settlement type places eventually became like homeless camps. There were people coming in doing drugs. There were all the problems that come with, you know, people who live that kind of lifestyle. And eventually it just sort of fell apart. I was there myself when they had Occupy Montreal, and I remember they had this like gathering outside and this sort of democratic, you know, discussion, and you cannot have any kind of successful uprising or revolt or you know, movement of any kind if you don't have actual leadership, and they don't have that. There might be some people who have leadership qualities who would take the lead, but they don't have any real leadership. And so it's disorganized. Where's the evidence that they're organized, that it's a real uprising, that it's a real violent, especially uprising? It's just not there. I think this is like another, you know, it's like Occupy 2.0. So I'm not overly worried about it. I did see the massive, violent, intense looting in California. I've seen the footage from Walnut Creek, Santa Monica. I know that that has been a problem. Looting in and of itself is not a way to social reform. I mean, it expresses the anger, but there has to be more than that if you want anything to actually change. And looting is also just something that thugs will do. People who are waiting for an opportunity to go and commit crimes with impunity. If there's a protest and there starts a little bit of looting, like somebody breaks a window, there are people who will come out of the woodwork who may or may not even be politically motivated or organized, who will just loot because they can. It's like there are many things going on. There is, I believe, a real awakening about the injustices in the system. There are opportunists who are using this as a great chance to go in and loot the stores. Maybe just really angry people, or just people who like free stuff. On a political level, for sure, the left can use this, and even fuel it, to try to take down the Republicans. It's just in time for an election. But I think that the people who are the real activists, who really are organized and who really want social change, I don't think there is a lot in it for them, for there to be a lot of just rampant, random looting that doesn't really achieve anything. I mean, if you're an activist, if you have some kind of a movement and you have goals, what you need to do is have laws changed. And some of that's been happening with the talk of defunding the police or restructuring police departments. I'm not sure how much that would accomplish long term, because you have to look at what is above that is giving the police the power to do these things. They did change some laws. This kind of chokehold is now illegal in New York, apparently. But you have to go higher than that. In the 1970s, when Nixon started the drug war, there were racist motivations. I mentioned that before. They had lost slavery, which the economy had relied on. They had then desegregated, which, as far as the rich people who were in power, this caused other problems. And actually, the drug war was a sort of sneaky backdoor way to create a slave labor force. I mean, it was at that point, with the starting of the drug war, which was then increased under Reagan, this is when crack suddenly appeared. At that point, like, people were being conditioned that this was such a big problem, that it was a problem that happened with colored people. And so this justified the police going in and targeting those neighborhoods. And I had heard other reports where they were bringing crack in too, and they were bringing guns. So this was like a big setup. And then under Clinton, mandatory minimum sentences and 3 strikes laws. And of course, the whole system is, again, stacked against people of color. Not to say that white people aren't also affected by those things. They are. Mostly poor white people, because the rich ones can afford, good lawyers. So it's not only a race problem, it's a class problem. But it does also especially affect people of color. This groundwork was laid for the prison system to become an industry, a slave labor industry. That's really what it is. How are they going to get rid of this problem? They have over 2 million people in jail in America. And those prisons have contracts with companies and with towns. And their mandate is to keep the prisons full and to provide this extremely cheap labor for these corporations. That's a corporatocracy problem that you have there. And I think, in the bigger picture, the problem is that the American system exploits people who are disenfranchised, who can't stand up for themselves. Whether they're white or brown or black, people who are poor are at a major disadvantage. It's the opposite of an egalitarian society. It's a really dog eat dog, sink or swim. And when it comes to the prison system, if you're poor or you're a minority, you're definitely more likely to be a target. And I want to give you an example of laws that it's people think, with violent crime. No. We're not talking about violent crime here. I remember seeing this documentary called Man Outside with Reggie Yates, British guy, black guy. And he went to this one town, I think it might have been in Minnesota, but I'm not 100% sure. You can check out the documentary. And what goes on in this town is that if people have an infraction while they're driving, it could be a busted taillight, it could be they missed a turn signal, it could be like any little thing. They're given a ticket. If the ticket's not paid by a certain time, they lose their driver's license. Of note, people of color, especially black people, are pulled over disproportionately. They're given this ticket, then they can't pay it, they lose their driver's license, they're pulled over again, and then you actually go to jail for driving without a license. These are people who didn't commit really any kind of crime. These are like act and statute kind of things. This is not, common law. And then you end up with people in jail for that. And then once you have a criminal record mark in your history, you become disenfranchised. It's hard to get a job. You can't vote. Lots of problems. We don't have that up here. Actually, you can still vote if you have a criminal record, and you can still get a job. And if you get a ticket here for a driving infraction, they don't take your license away. And if you don't pay it, you just get bigger fines. I mean, I don't know what happens down the road because I've never been in that situation, but it's not like that. It's not like what you have in the States and in some parts of the States. So it's like the system is really set up to put lots of people in jail. So everybody's talking about defunding the police, but what about those laws? What about the 3 strikes laws? What about mandatory minimum sentences? Like, you need to see the documentary 13th. That will explain a lot if you haven't seen it already on Netflix. Why is there a mandatory minimum sentence for crack and not for cocaine? Who does cocaine? Rich people do. Who smokes crack? Poor people do. So these laws are biased. They're biased against people who are economically underprivileged, and they're biased against people of color. I mean, there's a reason why they say driving while black. You know, they pull black people over, I think, twice as much. Although out of the people that are stopped, if they're looking for contraband, the black drivers turn out to have it less often than the white drivers that they stop. See, these are the real big problems. This is the big fish. This is the big shark behind the little fish. Why is nobody talking about the laws in the criminal justice system? Why aren't they talking about that stuff? Why aren't they talking about their privatized prisons? All I'm hearing about is police brutality. Who is giving the police this power? You need to be looking at that. Yes, you need reforms for police, but you need reforms even higher up. You know, there are so many crazy stories out there. In America, if you get arrested, you get held on remand. You can get held on remand for 2 or 3 years. Over here, a lot of the time, you just get out on your own recognizance. And then if you do have a trial, it's not going to be in 2 or 3 years. And if you do get time, it's not going to be that long. And in America, because you get these heavy sentences and these long periods of remands, a lot of people who go in who don't have the money to get out on bail will cop a plea. They'll plead guilty, even if they're not guilty, so that they do a shorter amount of time, because they may do all their remand time, then get their trial, and if they're found guilty, they're going to give them a bigger sentence. So there's all the incentive for people to just plead guilty. Whereas up here, I mean, I've known people who had gotten arrested for drug distribution. They're not held in jail on remand, and they didn't pay bail. So that's also another thing. Why are so many people being put in jail, and especially for nonviolent offenses? It's not like that here. That's one reason why I don't think we're going to have these kind of riots. Our whole system is different. Anyway, I just wanted to say that on the big picture, I'm not worried about the Seattle situation. It sounds more like a Occupy situation right now. And on the whole, you need to reform the whole system. Otherwise, this is just going to continue. I mean, do you really think it's okay that there's 2,300,000 Americans in jail? You have the biggest prison population in the entire world, with only 5% of the world's population? That has a really negative effect on society. 1/3 of black American men ending up in jail at some point in their lifetime. And it could be for an unpaid ticket and a revoked license. It could be really anything. That's why I'm wondering, why is nobody talking about that? That's what's making me suspicious, if anything. Is that what all these groups, what are they doing about that stuff? Well, maybe this is just a beginning and then they're going to get to that later, but I hope that they do get to that. Otherwise, there's not going to be enough progress. Anyway, those were my thoughts on the situation. Let me know what you think. I mean, I could say a lot more other things too, but it's just, I can't be here all night. I'm so tired and hungry. But thank you so much for joining me. God bless you guys. Thanks again for your support on Patreon. Don't forget to check out the link for the pouches. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.